Did you know that in the Victorian times, one of the most disgusting and craziest jobs was that of a tosher? Toshers, otherwise known as sewer hunters, would hunt through people's poo in the sewers looking for any valuable items that might have found their way down there. And this is just one of the many grisly but true facts surrounding the stinky history of London sewers, a history which I want to investigate today. So I've come to the London Museum of Water and Steam here at Kew Bridge to find out more. So this building is now a museum and tells the story of London's water supply, its people, the site and the amazing pumping engines that helped make London what it is today. But it hasn't always been this way. Back in the Victorian times, this building was used as a pumping station, and as such it was used to clean and then transport drinking water all over London. Now, this is one of my local museums, so I can tell you now that just inside are loads of unbelievable facts, which I'm really excited to share with you. So, let's go. To tell the stinky history of London's sewers, we're going to need to travel back 500 years to Tudor London. Now, the Tudors didn't have plumbing like we do, so instead they relied on the rivers of London doing the work for them. To go to the toilet, they'd use chamber pots or privies, which were often just a hole in the ground or a piece of wood over a bowl. They would then dump their waste, and by waste I mean poo and wee, right out into the street. So every time I come here, I always think, oh, someone's left their cup of tea out. Hello, everybody. So this is a replica of a house from 1660 in Fleet Lane. It says, this charming family home has no running water, an outdoor privy and a leaky cesspit. Sounds really gross. I love this. So it's easier to throw your wee out the window than walking down the stairs. That's just lazy. Open sewers, which were essentially just ditches in the ground, carried their waste downhill and into the Thames, or into one of the smaller rivers flowing into the Thames, known as tributaries. Imagine that, walking along the path with your neighbour's wee and poo floating alongside you. Gross. This open sewage is what led to so many of the early deaths and plagues in England. But it's apparently also one of the reasons why it's chivalrous for the man to walk on the street side of the pavement. You see, this chivalrous act stopped the ladies walking in sewage. I've just been reading this and it's really interesting. It says London's lost rivers. Many of London's smaller rivers and streams were used as open sewers, but as the population increased, obviously so did the smell. So the rivers are now covered over and it forms part of London's sewer system. Now, in the Victorian times, in terms of water and waste, life wasn't much better. You see, the population of London had risen from around 60,000 people in the Tudor times to around 2 million people in Victorian times. Now, 2 million people produce a lot of waste, and this sewage all ended up in the River Thames, the very same place which water companies were sourcing water from and delivering it, untreated and unfiltered, straight into people's homes. In fact, by the 1840s, around 150 million tonnes of waste was being poured into the River Thames each year. That's the equivalent weight of 90 million cars. That's a lot of poo. Well, if you think that's gross, then this subject's about to get a whole lot worse. For the contaminated drinking water finally led to a crisis. Its name, cholera. I'm off to meet Liz and the director of the museum to find out more. So Liz, Victorian London. The sewage network is still pretty basic with open sewers. And not only have you got the stench from the sewage in the rivers, but there's horse poo on the streets and pollution from all the factories. Now, there must have been a breaking point, right? When the Victorians turned around and said, stop, enough is enough. Something has to be done about this stink.
Yeah, London was absolutely stinking and the Thames was the worst part of that. And the breaking point came in 1858 with the Great Stink, when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert wanted to take a boat ride and the Thames smelt so bad they had to get back off again. Even the members of Parliament were dipping their curtains in disinfectant, putting up other windows to try and keep the smell out.
No, it must have been horrific. But despite this, the stink wasn't the Victorians' biggest problem, was it?
No, most Londoners lived in really small, cramped houses all together, and none of those houses had any toilets. And they kept being big outbreaks of a disease called cholera. And what was happening was that all that human waste, all the poo and the wee, was just being thrown into those open water sewers, and it was going into the drinking water.
No, that's disgusting. So you're telling me that the cholera was caused by the water. Did they know this at the time?
They didn't, but if we go inside the museum, I can show you how they found out.
Yes, please. Let's go.
It was difficult for the Victorians to prove that the cholera was being caused by the drinking water, but one man called John Snow came up with a way. John Snow realised that there was a big outbreak of cholera in Soho, but all the people were using one water pump for their drinking water. He took the handle away and the cholera went. So he proved that the water was causing the cholera, but the Victorians didn't have amazing microscopes like we have today to look at the water closely. They were getting better. So they started to look at this water, and what they saw was little bacteria and raw sewage in the drinking water. And this was so disgusting that the people of London started calling the Thames and the drinking water monster soup.
So obviously we don't still have open sewers today. What happened? When did this change?
Well, this was the turning point. They realised they couldn't keep drinking this, it was making them sick. So they asked a man called James Bazalgette to design a series of sewers for London that are so amazing that it's still what we use in London today.
That's amazing. So how did they clean up the water?
Well, that was actually discovered by the Queen's doctor, James Simpson, and he had a really good idea called the slow sand filtration system. You use rocks, smaller rocks and sand to clean water. It's so good a system that we still use it today, but I can show you how we make it happen.
Yes, please.
Lauren, we are going to build our own slow sand filtration system to clean our dirty drinking water. You can't have it yet. We're going to use this coffee filter just to stop all of our ingredients falling through. Now, can you remember what's the thing that is the bottom of our system?
Rocks.
Absolutely. So the first thing we need is some large rocks going in there. What was next? Stones. So just a bit slightly smaller rocks, and we'll pour them in. And then last thing, sand. Absolutely. That's just what we want. Now it is ready for our filthy water. Oh yeah.
Wow,
What a difference. And this is the same system we use today, but obviously on a much bigger scale.
That's incredible. Look at this. Look how dirty and filthy it is going in and how clear it is coming out. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Liz. I have to say, I'm really impressed. I didn't expect the water to come out quite so clear. I've learned so much today about the stinky history of London's sewers, but there's so much more to this museum than sewage, so you'll have to come yourselves to check it out. Now, time for a cup of tea, I think. Let's hope there's no monsters inside.
Right.